Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and my co-host is my brother, Brent Call, behind the helm.
What's up, guys?
Today's podcast is with the hunting public. If you don't know who they are, we did a podcast with them last year at the ATA show. They have a YouTube channel. If you've been following the podcast, you've heard me talk about them quite a bit because I have a newfound love for whitetail hunting.
How dare you?
And I also love how they do a lot of public land whitetail hunting. In my opinion, it's one of the best YouTube channels out there right now for hunting. The guys are real humble. They just love to get out. What you see is what you get. I have watched, I don't know why, I just have this infatuation with whitetail at the moment. And I have watched a lot of their films, a lot of their YouTube videos. I was just on that hunt with Randy Newberg and Arizona Game and Fish in Arizona, hunting Coues deer, mule deer, coatimundi,
javelina,
blah, 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 javelina.
Birds, ducks.
Just did the podcast with David Brinker. Just did one with Ryan Lampers from that trip. Ryan shot a giant Boone Crockett Coues deer. We talk to each of those guys. The one with Ryan is especially interesting is anything Ryan says you can apply to just hunting in general. He's an assassin. You know, he can target a deer and that deer is slated for death, or anything that he goes for. Right. So pretty awesome to watch Ryan hunt, learn from him, ask him all the questions, share it on the podcast. That was a new show that just came out. You should check that out if you missed that. Anyway, back to the hunting public. I was able to sit down with them. This hunt is new for them. They're breaking out of their whitetail kind of experience and they're going into Western hunting and spot and stock. They're a little bit, it's self-admittedly, they felt like fish out of water. On this episode, we talked to them about the Coues deer hunt. We were about halfway through it. In the meantime, I have been watching. They're very quick. They have got, I see like 5 videos or 4 videos out. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 videos out of their Arizona experience, their Arizona Coues deer hunt.
Where do they find
public
the time?
land? And they crush it, man. I mean, they already have like 40, 50,000 views on their video. It's been out like a week, 2 days, 40,000 views. They're great. They just do such a good job. They're great guys. And today I interview Aaron Warburton and
Orbitron.
I love that name. It sounds like a transformer.
It totally does.
Also, I interview Clements.
He was really humble. You'll notice in the podcast, Brian will ask him, so who's the best at blah, blah, blah? And then he'll be like, well, we're all pretty good at it. And then Orbitron's like, no, it's him.
Yeah. Greg is funny. He's a real humble guy. He's not in front of the camera a lot. Got to know him a little bit when I was down there. I think that's just why one of the reasons they're doing so well is they're just down to earth, great dudes, humble and great.
They don't seem like they're afraid of getting their hands dirty and working hard.
Yeah, they're hard workers. Yeah, for sure. And they're kicking butt. I mean, love it. So if you haven't checked out the hunting public, do it. If you want to watch a great, some rookies going after, I wouldn't say rookies because they are, they have killed their share of giant whitetail bucks. They refer to themselves
as unconventional, out-of-the-box whitetail hunters.
Right. But rookies in the sense that they're new to Coues deer hunting, or even just Western hunting in general. It's a great little video series. Go check them out, The Hunting Public on YouTube. I hope you guys enjoy this podcast and give them a follow, subscribe to their channel, look them up on Instagram. Good dudes. So there's that. And then before we go on, I went checker hunting yesterday.
How was that, Brian?
With Matt Davis and Jay Beyer. Jay Beyer Imaging on Instagram. Matt Davis here from Mountain Ops and previous to that Hoyt. And dude, checker hunting, I have decided I got to do a lot more of it. It was pretty fun, but it's among the hardest, like most physically demanding hunting that I think that you can choose to do. It was seriously, it's like 17 miles of hiking yesterday, up and down some of the steepest, rockiest, gnarly terrain. You would never, deer and elk don't go in those places. Just birds that can fly. And some of that terrain we went through was just nasty. And we got one bird.
Hold on. You hiked 17 miles. There was 3 of you. And you got one bird?
Well, in fairness to those two, they were trying to help me shoot my first bird. So there were many opportunities where they could have shot birds, and they were letting me, and I'm
blowing it.
I'm just absolutely. One point I couldn't get my safety off on the
dude
shotgun.
That's the worst.
And birds flying over in singles, like one at a time. I could have shot like 10 out of the sky there.
Oh geez,
I was in the perfect spot. Anyway, not 10, but but per unit of nutrition.
So if you were
against energy expended, you're gonna lose weight and die trying to live off chucker. But it was really fun. That was really fun. But that was yesterday. It was pretty cool. Before we get into this show, I wanted to read a couple of comments. Ominous Rooster left a comment on YouTube, and Brent, can you read that?
Yeah, this is from the Coues hunting episode with David Brinker. It said, you guys are making this hunt too simple. Coues deer will challenge every last patient, skill, and knowledge you have.
Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. But I don't think we were making it sound too easy. But yes, were we able to kill 2 Coues deer? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And were we close to killing Coues deer? Mm-hmm. Yes. And did we see a lot of giant bucks and get close? Yes. So, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. It's not like this undoable hunt. It can be done. Mm-hmm. Last year when I went, I almost killed a Coues deer last year. And it was my first time going, and, it just didn't quite work out.
Yeah. And I mean, David Brinker, Lampers, the hunting public guys, they all kind of had their own idea of how they were going to go and how they were going to approach it and what they're going to do next time. And the funny thing to me is that it was all kind of similar. That all their plans for next year, which, by the way, they all said they got the bug and they're going to be doing it. This is going to be a hunt they're going to do for the rest of their lives.
I really think this is an annual thing. And speaking of that, so my uncle, there's an upcoming podcast with my Uncle Kevin, who owns High Point Outfitters.
That'll come out in a day or two after this one.
Yep. He's hunted Arizona his whole life. He's an expert. We have him on every year. The tag deadline, application deadlines for Arizona are approaching in a few weeks for elk and antelope. And then later, a couple of months after that, you have deadlines for other species like mule deer. So we'll be publishing that podcast in a few days. Look for that. That will detail basically application strategies for Arizona and all the different opportunities for hunting in Arizona and things maybe you don't realize that will greatly increase your opportunities there, including things like you can have 2 tags. You can have a tag. You're allowed 1 deer per year in Arizona, but you can have a draw. You can draw a once in a lifetime type deer tag, or like a hard to draw tag. You can get lucky and draw one of those, but you can also just buy the over the counter one, and then you can hunt both tags. You just can only kill 1 deer. Those are some interesting, unique things about Arizona that we'll be talking about as well in that podcast. So look for that. And then we have an upcoming show with my buddy Ryan Mickler from the Order of Man podcast. We might talk about the Gillette razor commercial that just came out, and
probably will.
A couple other things about being manly. And then I just want to remind you all to go check out Mountain Ops movie night, where I'll be showing a film there, as well as Jason Phelps and a couple others. You can get tickets at MTNOps/Hunt Expo online. And then if you use the code MTNOps and the Hunt Expo app, if you're coming to the hunting expo, you'll get $10 off your ticket.
What is the date for the Mountain Ops movie night? It's February.
It's 15th? February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day.
Ooh.
Yep. The evening of February 15th.
So make sure you get your lady boxes of chocolates and roses so you can come to the event on the 15th.
Yes. So without further ado, we'll jump into this podcast with the hunting public. Can't say enough about those guys. Go check them out. Check out their YouTube videos of this hunt that we're talking about. And then leave us comments. Let us know how we're doing, what you like, what you don't like. Any questions, send our way, and we'll try to answer them. And as always, stay gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. We are in Arizona, in a place that shall not be named publicly, but on public land. And I'm joined by the hunting public. We have Aaron Warburton, Aaron Warburton, and Greg Clements. For those who don't know, you guys have been doing, you guys have an incredible whitetail channel, public land whitetail hunting YouTube channel that you've got going. And I assume now you're kind of branching out and it's just the everything public land hunting. No? Yes?
Sort of. Yeah, it's sort of all kinds of stuff goes on the channel.
Opportunistic. Small game, big game. But obviously our bread and butter coming from the Midwest is
public
deer
land.
And turkeys. Public land, deer and turkeys.
Yeah.
And you guys were, prior to this, because you were on a podcast with me last year at the ATA show.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy Eldridge at Hoyt introduced me to you guys. And I had known Sam prior to that, meeting him, and he told me a whole bunch about you guys. And then I got to the show, met you, did a podcast, and on that episode, we kind of got the history of how you guys got started a little bit with the hunting public. And then this year, I think I've watched almost every single one of your YouTube films.
Sweet.
Videos.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
They're just, first of all, whitetail hunting is pretty awesome. And the way you guys have filmed it and the way you do it on public land, it's been impressive, to say the least. So
thanks.
I'm excited to have you guys here and on the show. And I've got a number of questions for you. And the first question I have, just to start off, it's pretty easy because there's really, I think there's a wrong answer, but I'm gonna see what you guys think. I want to ask you guys, of all the archery superheroes that are out there, which one is the least dumb?
Which one's the least dumb?
The least dumb, because they're all kind of dumb. So you've got Green Arrow, Hawkeye, The Arrow, Arrowette.
Never heard of that.
Never heard of Arrowette?
No.
It's because she's dumb. And then there's Shaft.
Which one is that? Like,
these are like
Shaft the detective
DC
from the
Comics
70s?
superhero archery dudes
Oh, man.
and gals.
Hawkeye's pretty sweet in the movies, but the idea is pretty dumb. Like, he's standing right next to the Hulk and Iron Man, and he's shooting arrows.
Isn't he normal too? Like
yeah,
he
he's just a
doesn't
normal dude. Just a
Not
regular dude
superhuman or anything?
with unbelievably
accurate.
good skills at shooting a bow.
Speaking of which, Aaron, where would you rank yourself among archers?
Oh, I would say below average. As like a target archer.
Would you
Certainly.
concur, Greg?
He's solid when it comes to hunting,
Mm-hmm.
but I just don't do a lot of target archery or 3D.
Yeah.
Hard to know, really. We just don't shoot a ton together.
Yeah, I don't shoot much. Period.
Yeah.
I don't shoot a lot. Like once hunting season comes in, I shoot a little bit before hunting season to make sure everything's tuned in and everything. But then once hunting season comes in, I might shoot one arrow.
Wow.
A day. Right, or one arrow right before we go hunting. I
Yeah.
pick a random yardage just completely out of the blue. I don't range it. I just step out there and shoot it. And then I go to the woods.
And you have no trouble killing a lot of whitetails.
Yeah, but they're usually pretty close.
I was watching that one video where you were spotting stock a buck, and he was in the thick, and you got so close. 12 yards, I think?
Yeah, he came in closer than I was hoping in that instance.
It crushed me. It crushed me that you didn't get that one, because he was pretty handsome.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one. That was a real big one.
And that was public land?
Yep. That was a bedding area that we've hunted for several years and slid in there and cut a big track on the way in. And Jake and I were looking for a spot to potentially set up either in the tree or on the ground or something. And I looked down and he was walking through the grass at 40 yards.
Breezy day.
Yeah, windy, wet, perfect conditions
Yep.
for sneaking around on the ground.
So what happened? You just couldn't get a clean shot, or?
Yeah, he was facing me through quite a bit of brush at 10, 12 yards, and I just didn't want to take a chance at arrow deflecting. And that was pretty much it. I mean, as he was coming up through there, it's windy enough that I felt like I could get away with drawing, but there was a little pin oak right in front of me, in between me and the deer, and I wanted to wait until he hit that and then time it right and come to full draw real quick because he was so close. And I came to full draw, and when I did, I don't know if he heard the bow getting drawn back or if he saw me, but when I look back at the footage, he whips his head over there right before he hits that tree, and he's coming in with his head kind of low to the ground. So what I think I did is I drew just a smidge too early before he hit that tree and obscured his vision, and he caught just a little bit of movement. And then when he did, he looked out there and saw this blob sitting in the middle of the field. And it still took him a little bit to figure it out, but
Because you almost were able to shoot him when he turned and trotted it off.
yeah, he turned and trotted off, and I stood up because I figured, a lot of times they don't know what you are. They're just going to bound off and then turn around and look back. And when I did that, he stopped in an opening 35 yards, but Jake wasn't on him, and I was having to kind of lean underneath a limb to shoot. It just wouldn't have been a good shot to take. So,
Yeah.
he got away. It was a sad day.
A classic reaction too.
Oh yeah, my eyes were
Or like
about the size of golf balls.
You'd have to watch the video to kind of see the the frustration in your face, because it was maybe a day or two before you had one that you were almost killed that got away at the last second.
Yeah, 2 mature bucks in 3 days inside of 25 yards. Didn't get him.
So, Greg, how would you rank yourself as an archer?
Well, back in my younger days, I actually shot quite a bit of competition archery.
Did you?
At the state level. And I shot up until I was about 18 before I went to college, and actually won a fair number of tournaments.
He's pretty good shot.
Back in the day, you could kind of, knew where I stood.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it just, as with a lot of people, you get into your adult life and, family, careers, stuff like that. I just don't shoot as much as I used to. So, I don't know. Somewhere in the middle.
He's a good shot. Don't let him fool you. He can shoot.
Like in your group, of all the guys that you got hunting in there, you've got the guys that get it done just so well. And in your group of guys, like, who's the guy that's the killer? Like, if you were to a guy's going to go out and he's going to go after it, who's that guy?
Depends on the situation, probably.
Yeah, I mean,
like, we all kind of specialize in different stuff.
Yeah.
Zach loves the ground game.
Yeah, he does.
The ghillie suit?
Yeah, he loves the ground game, and yeah, each one of us has our own
skill and their
kind of
interest.
different style. I would say Zach hunts the most out of everybody, but that could have just been this year too. I mean, every year slightly different. But as a whole, we kind of work together as a team. Yeah, everybody had a pretty good season this year.
I would
across
say
the board.
We probably had more opportunities, more kills, more encounters with good bucks, cool encounters. This one, it was a great year. It really was all around.
It was really fun to follow.
Thanks, man.
So, the reason I ask about the archery too is because we're here in Arizona hunting Coues deer, and they're very small.
Yeah,
small.
They're like smaller than a fawn from Missouri.
Yeah,
that's what we're comparing.
Crazy, huh?
To. Yeah,
like
they're tiny, man.
You don't realize how small either because they're in the desert. And there's not like normal trees to give you perspective.
Right.
Dude, that one this morning was at 59 yards, and I could have swore it was 150 yards.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, man, that's close to being in range. Like, that bush is, but that deer just looks like this little dot. I hit him with the rangefinder. It's like 59. There's no way I'm going to shoot at that thing.
The first time I came out with Randy Newberg, we're driving down the road, and I look, and there's a buck on the side of the road, and it's a giant. It's a giant. And Wade's like, that's the biggest Coues deer I've ever seen. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man. And we talk about it for a while, and he's with this doe, and he smells her, and I'm like, well, shoot, he's like 130 or something. And so we get out, and we're looking at the buck, and he's just standing there, and I'm like, I just range it just to find out. It's 80 yards. I'm like, what? The whole time he could have, in 80, I would take an 80-yard shot, especially if he holds still, When I've just learned hunting out west, there tends to be, it's really tough to get to 12 yards on something like this, like a Coues deer, and where there's not really trees. And I mean, what have you figured out so far as travel patterns and any plans or strategies that you're putting together right now?
Yeah, somewhat. I would say we're definitely fish out of water. We've been getting our butts kicked pretty good on this trip. But like you said, they're tough little devils out here. But we've been tossing around these ideas all week, trying to kind of apply what we have learned about how deer bed and travel out east and in the Midwest. I would say our theory is that there's a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
It's just, especially with how they bed, we've seen these deer bed in the same locations day in and day out now. I'm not saying that that's the rule by any means. We've been hunting Coues deer for 4 days now. So take this with however many grains of salt you wish. But we feel like that we've got some grasp on how they bed and what kind of cover that they tend to favor.
Yeah.
When bedding. There's that, I don't know what that gray colored brush is. Randy knew the name of it when we were talking about it the other night, but it's about waist high.
Mm-hmm. The thorny stuff?
Thorny.
Yep.
It's hard to get through. And then underneath it, a lot of times, there's some real nice, clean green growth. Mm-hmm. And it grows in those oak woodland spots on the sides of hills, especially, when we saw it, especially on like north-facing slopes. I'm not saying that's a rule either, but that type of habitat on those hills is similar to what deer bed in back home. Mm-hmm. Basically, thick cover, but not too thick for them to walk in. Mm-hmm. And it's waist high. So when they're laying there bedded, they're pretty well hidden. They're on a hill so they can see everything down below them. And most of the time, they have the wind coming over the top of them in some way, shape, or form. So they can smell you if you're on top of the ridge. They can hear you if you're up there. I know that from first-hand experience so far. And they can see you if you come in from down below. So these things are a booger to stalk, just because of how they're set up. But the reason why I say they like that type of waist-high growth is that, like I mentioned, they can still see when they're bedded, but then when they stand up, they can survey everything around. A lot of people think deer want to be in the thickest, nastiest stuff, and it's usually not the case.
Right. They like to be able to see. Mm-hmm. That's what we've noticed, too. I think Lampers is calling that like scrub brush or oak brush.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What we've been doing is moving to one side of the ridge where you can glass back into that. It's just a mountain of brown.
Yep.
And if you watch it, there was like 20 deer on the one slope today, and it was just 20 does. They couldn't put horns on anything, but 20 does on that slope in that scrub brush. So
wow.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. That's where they were yesterday. That's where they were today. So what else have you noticed?
Well, today we tried setting up like we normally would on like whitetails out east. And so far, it looks like the best way, judging from you guys, you guys have knocked a couple of these things down already. And spotting and stalking has worked. Mm-hmm. I think if you just put yourself in that situation over and over and over again, eventually it's going to work out and you're going to get a shot at one of them. But today we tried to set up in a travel corridor, or kind of a saddle that sits in between. Well, it's a saddle in the middle of a ridge that kind of connects both sides. There's gullies on both sides of the ridge and little ditches and stuff like that they're bedded in. And for whatever reason, the last few days, we've watched these bucks cruise back and forth through that saddle, just checking those bedding areas.
Yep.
And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you go down through there, there's 10, 15 canyons that all look the same off of the main ridge. And just about every one of them, there's a deer bedded on that oak brush side.
Yep.
Maybe it's one doe.
Right.
But in order for those bucks to check all those does, they're coming up over top of that ridge in that saddle, and then they're running the downwind side of those bedding areas, or they're hooking in somehow. But they're not trying to walk through a bunch of thick stuff to get from A to B. That saddle is the easiest, cleanest way for them to come in there and then come in directly above those does.
Yeah.
And see what's going on.
So last year when I was here, it was really hot. It was 2 weeks later than this. Everything, there was no water. So I see water's everywhere right now.
Yeah, it is.
There was no water anywhere. It was hot. And when I finished the podcast last time, a lot of guys have been hunting Coues for years. They said you should really sit water.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to spot and stalk. That's the hunt I wanted to have. And so I didn't sit water. But what I noticed was same thing, bucks running the ridges over the top of those does. And one morning, Randy and I counted like 6 bucks that walked the same ridge checking. That's when I decided, I need to be in these pinch points, these saddles where these animals. So my plan this year was to be there, to figure out where some of those spots were, go back to my old hunts and from last year and where that worked. But the first 2 days we got here, it was just windy enough that you could get away with sneaking around. And it's wet enough that it's not nearly as loud as it normally is to walk around. Every terrain area can be very different. One can have rocks and just brush and can be gnarly, and then one's kind of pretty passable.
Right. Yeah, even here, there's so many different little situations. Every single spot's slightly different. And that's one thing we talk about all the time is situational hunting, even down to the very specific situation that you're in. I mean, when we're hunting areas down here, we may drive 30 minutes and be hunting higher country, then come back towards camp and be hunting them in mesquite brush.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Just within that small distance, you've got different situations that you're going to see.
With watching Ryan Lampers, he shot that big buck, and he kills deer spot and stalk everywhere he goes. He's kind of, he's just good at spot and stalk. But watching him do it, he's very methodical, and he'll spend 3 or 4 days trying to kill the same deer, just getting somewhere nearby it, watching it, figuring out which way it tends to go each day. And they seem to be fairly patternable, at least what we're seeing over on this ridge. We're trying to get that big buck that Ryan was after that one when he shot the one he shot.
Sure.
And we've seen him a couple of days now, again, but he's all in that local area. I don't think they go very far.
I don't either.
Doesn't seem like it.
I don't either. And that's another similarity that we were discussing today. When we were driving around the last few days, everywhere you find like a water hole that's more of a permanent type water source, like a deeper
cattle tank.
Cattle tank.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of water right now, there's still a ton of deer in that general area. Every time you find one of those, if you start looking around within that square mile of that tank, there's going to be deer. I mean, almost without fail, when we found deer. And like I was telling the guys, we were driving around earlier, and they're like, man, we're not going to sit water because there's just water everywhere. It's no big deal. But got to thinking, I'm like, man, these things are exhibiting very similar behavior as far as their home ranges go as what whitetails do out east. And that's one of the major factors. Like, think about it, it's dry down here most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to live in the place that they grew up.
Right.
And they're not going to grow up in the middle of the desert with no sort of
just because there's
consistent
water there
source.
right now.
Right, just because there's water there right now. They're not nomadic and just roam all over the place like some of the other animals are.
I wondered about that myself, just seeing how dry it was last year and seeing how many deer are around a certain big water source. Mm-hmm. And I've wondered that same thing, because one thing is you get these big peaks and you see these big, giant, as far as the eye can see, like mountainside that's just covered in grass. Same kind of country as where we're at, but not a single deer on it. Mm-hmm. Not one. Ryan and I were talking, and nearest thing we could figure was there's just no water over there. There's just none up there, and so they don't spend. It probably would only take them a few minutes to get there, but I think they don't like to travel too far from their little comfort area, and so why are they going to go over there?
Right. That's what I think about. I think, like, if you got a buck and you're just worried about a buck, for instance, forget about all the rest of the deer. If you got a buck that's 3, 4, 5 years old and he's lived in this general area his whole life, he wouldn't have lived there if there wasn't all of those habitat factors that he needs in order to survive. Yeah. And, like, even though it's wet right now and they don't need a ton of water to survive, they're still going to exist somewhere close to that spot because they've had to up to this point.
Yeah.
During dry seasons.
I found a couple of spots where I saw a lot of activity, like tracks, and so I hung a couple of cameras. They've been up for 4 days now, and I'm very curious.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I haven't checked them yet. I really wanted to hang cameras in like 10 spots, 20 spots, whatever, just to find out, are they really hitting the saddle like I think they are, and what time of day and how many. But it's been tough to find those kind of tight points. And when we see those bucks all rutting on the hill, and we've been after the same one, he's been on the same general mountain, but he hasn't traveled more than, a half a mile.
Right. Yeah.
Half a mile.
We were hunting that big buck a few days ago. The hush crew saw the first day, and we went back in the second day, saw him again. Actually ended up spooking the deer on accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, spooked the heck out of him. He definitely heard us saw something, because I heard him take off. We were actually eating lunch, and I just stepped over to the edge of the ridge, and poof, he took out of there, and I knew it was a deer. So I ran to the edge of the ridge, and I glassed down, and I could see it was him. And he ran off, crossed a big steep gully, got up on the next hill. He's probably 500 yards away, wouldn't you say? And he stopped over there, and he just looked back. And within 30 minutes, he was coming back up there. He didn't want to leave that area.
Wow.
He wasn't coming to that exact spot, but he was hooking back into that same ridge line.
Right.
It's possible the other guys even bumped him over to our ridge, too.
Yep.
So,
and that's the question we get asked all the times. Like, I spooked a big buck. What do I do? Is he going to leave forever? Will I ever see him again? Well, most of the time, no. He's not going to leave forever, but you kind of remember that spot and that situation that you spooked him, and it's just going to be smarter and harder to kill.
Yeah.
But that's why I think a lot of people believe that they leave. They're like so afraid to get aggressive and put pressure on deer. They're like, oh man, I did that once. I never saw him again. Well, you did that once, and he remembered that, and he just adapted his patterns and never left. And that's why you never saw him again. It's because you went back and hunted the same spot and tried to do the same exact thing, and he was on to you at that point because you educated him.
I want to get more into that. I want to get more into some of the things that you guys do that have contributed to your success, especially on public land. But before we do that, I want to finish this Coues deer thing. What's your impression now that you've come down here?
They're more killable than what I imagined, because I think they've done this hunt, 2 or 3 years now, and nobody had tagged one, and it just kind of seemed like it was kind of out there, like really almost impossible. And then you guys knocked down 2 in 1 day. And it's just, I think, getting those optimal conditions. We had a windy day. You're able to stick with the deer. And that same day we got close, and now we're at day 4. Got close this morning based on what we've learned. I think if you have enough time, you can put it all together.
Yeah.
So it's not...
They're flighty, though. They're tough.
Yeah, it's
super tough.
I almost killed one that I came down. Last year was my first year. I almost killed like 4 different deer. Just so close, but just could never quite make it happen. But I also felt like in every situation, I wasn't in control like I was this time, where the conditions were just favoring me. The weather, the wind, the one thing I've noticed, and I talked to Ryan some more about this, Ryan and David Brinker, who's been, we three of us been hunting together. And one of the things is that I think is, when it comes to spot and stock, is there's hunting the terrain and then there's hunting the animal. And I feel like often I'd rather spend time in the terrain that I feel is more conducive to spot and stock than I am to go find an animal that hangs out in the most difficult place.
Sure.
And like this area where Ryan shot his big buck, and the other one is right there with it, this other giant, it's on a big open face. So when you're sitting there, you can glass the whole thing. It's kind of thick, but you can see the whole thing. Whereas we went after a couple other bucks, and it's kind of rolling mountains. Mm-hmm. And you'll watch this buck rut a doe for an hour, and then they'll go down. Yep. And from there, we have no idea where he went.
Right.
We don't know if he went down and went 2 mountains over up a canyon, or if he stayed right where he was. And so it's like, you could spend a lot of time,
definitely,
waste a lot of time trying to go for bucks you think that you like, but are holding up in areas that are really tough to hunt. And that's why we're going back to the face tomorrow with David, because that spot, you can actually watch that buck, see where he goes, and then you could spend it all day getting in there carefully and get, within 100 yards, 50 yards, maybe even 20 if the wind and things go right, or if he's rutting and he's distracted, which is, Ryan just got in close enough that he let that buck come to him. Mm-hmm. These deer are so switched on. It seems that's really the ideal situation, is to get in position and kind of let them make a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
It's a different game, though.
Oh yeah, I mean, they got tons of predators down here. There's a reason why they're flighty,
especially when they can. It doesn't take much. They're just so tiny.
They're small.
Like anything can take them down.
They're so small, and that's another thing. Like even getting the shot itself is the challenge.
Yeah.
Like this morning, that thing's at 15 yards. All I could see was his head and his ears. And that's because he was just, barely over the top of a crest of the hill. Like, man, they're so small, low to the ground.
I had to climb a tree to shoot mine. Yeah. I knew I wouldn't be able to get a shot.
Yeah.
Like I was 24 yards from him, and I'm like, I know he's there, but I need to be in a spot where I can actually get an arrow in there, and it's just too thick. And there's no way I was going to get any closer. It was just kind of, I'd hit that wall.
Right.
Anything more, and it was going to end badly.
Yeah, no, that was cool. Using what you had available.
Yeah.
To make it work.
It was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But those deer, Brinker and I were, and Lampers were watching this deer this big buck come down this hill, and he goes by a cactus, and he looks up at the cactus, and he's rutting a doe, but he's like, then he stands up on his back legs, and he leans over, and he eats the flowers.
We saw him do that the other night.
Without getting stabbed by the cactus.
That's cool.
Yep.
And then he drops down and he walks off. So I'm like, we go over to that cactus. It's up to my nose.
Right.
For some reason, I thought it was 6 feet tall. I don't know. I pictured in my mind this giant tall cactus in perspective through the spotter. And then you go over there and you realize he had to stand on his hind legs to get to that. He's
That's
just like
funny.
a little dog.
Get right.
With horns.
They're not very big. They are tiny.
So
that makes it tough.
It is. So I actually was shooting that Garmin Zero sight because, and this is the one hunt I look forward to having that, because I can range without having to do all that extra movement, and where single yard accuracy is so critical because it's such a small animal.
Yeah, and they don't give you long.
No, and you got that little target window, and I'm like, that sight would really help. And when I was in the tree, I didn't quite know how far it was. Hard to judge on these things, but all I did is draw and ranged him, got it said 24 yards. I put it and I hit him. Elevation was exact. And last year I ran into problems where I'm like, is that 30? Is it 30, 32?
Yeah, you don't have any time to.
Yeah, I mean,
and they're gone.
Right.
Or you're pin gapping, and that if you're off on a target that's the size of
the dog
behind
behind
me, it's really hard. We were joking that we think what did Marcus Hockett? He was saying he thinks that the kill zone on a javelina is bigger than the kill zone on a Coues deer.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So, pretty crazy.
I mean, the challenge is twofold for a bow hunter that maybe doesn't hunt Coues very often because the animal's probably smaller than what you're used to seeing as far as deer goes that you'd be hunting. And also the cover tends to be thick enough that you may not have, objects to be able to range. You may just be looking across brush or grass or something like that and not have, something in between that to kind of go, okay, that's 10 to 20 to, however.
And that's the problem in any open country hunt. You just judging yardage is really tough. Yeah. Same thing happens in aspens groves. Like when we'll have elk or something come in, and you're just like, it's like a fun house. I'm like, I can't tell how far things are. Everything plays with your head. Yeah. I'm addicted though.
I am too.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't end up getting one, I want to come back and keep trying for these things. They're awesome.
And not only for that, but it's January, right? It's January. A lot of my hunts are over, but it's January, and I am able to hunt with a bow for awesome deer in a t-shirt.
Yeah, dude. We got 15 inches of snow on the ground at home right now, and another winter storm coming this weekend. And it's beautiful down here. Perfect. I mean, you can't ask for better hunting weather. What is it in the mornings when we get up?
It's like 39, 40. I think
Perfect.
the coldest was 39, and then it warms right up, but not too hot. You got a cool breeze whenever that sun's out, pretty much.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's incredible. So
we're just seeing tons of deer too, man. Like there's tons of deer.
This is one thing that I determined, because you can hunt coatimundi, you can hunt javelina, you can hunt Coues deer, jackrabbits, cottontail.
And on this tag, you can hunt mule deer.
Mule deer, yeah.
I went on a stalk for a mule deer buck tonight.
Yeah, and you got Mearns quail, ducks. All the ducks are legal. Limit 2 on some species. I know I'm missing some stuff.
I'm sure.
You almost need to plan like a 10-day to 2-week trip just to take advantage of what all is here because there's so much.
Here's what I was thinking, and we did this today. It was another hot day, real dry. Your sound carries like a mile. Like you'll start sneaking on a deer, and it'll look up at you from 300 yards.
Kind of a helpless feeling.
And it does. Even when you're being real quiet, and your voice, you'll hear people talking, you'll look, and there'll be like a car on the top of some mountain. Yep. I mean, it's crazy. So without wind, without a little something in your favor, you get a bunch of these kind of days where it's just the wind swirls too when you have this kind of heat. What we've done, we've come prepared. So it's like, it's just you hunt your Coues deer, but then in the afternoon you go puddle jump ducks, you hunt Mearns quail, you go and you hunt coyote. There's like a lot of options on those days.
Eric was predator calling today.
Yep.
Yeah. Forgot about that. We didn't mention that.
He killed a gray fox.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Thing's gorgeous.
I know. So it's pretty cool because you can switch it up and because some days I feel like especially if you're after a certain buck and you've been targeting him for a few days, like lampers, you could watch him all day, but in the afternoon he'll bed for 5 hours, and you're really hard pressed to try to move in on a day like today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like
calm.
You might as well just go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Hunt different animals for the day.
Wait for the right situation to present itself.
Yep.
Yep.
You need that. You need a little bit of weather with these things.
Mm-hmm.
You really do.
Did we mention jackrabbits?
Oh yeah.
Maybe we
Those
did. Yeah,
antelope jackrabbits. Have you guys seen one yet?
Oh, yeah. We saw one today, and I went on the sneak.
Have you put your hands on one?
No, tried. Things looks huge.
Dude, it's big as the Coues deer.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
It looks huge.
Yeah.
It stands as tall as the Coues deer. Know that with it by the tips of its ears.
Have you seen them run?
Yeah.
Like full speed run.
Uh-uh.
Like scary fast run.
No.
It's unreal. And they'll do it in the grass knee tall, and it'll sound like zzz. It'll make this weird whipping sound as it knocks all the grass down. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan was saying that they'll kind of bound up to be able to see.
Yeah.
So they'll run, bound.
Yep. They
up high to see.
They sound like a weed whacker. and you'll see them bump up in the air and then like a cartoon, like a Roadrunner. And then bounce. And they're wild. They're weird looking animals. They kind of creep me out somewhat. They
taste good. We ate some of them tonight.
I know. People say you can't cook jackrabbit and have it taste good.
That's not true.
I disagree.
Yeah.
It tastes really good.
So, what is that? Some kind of interference, it seems.
Phones? Phones do it?
I don't think so. I think it could be someone on the network.
Okay.
I don't know. So when you guys hunt whitetail, what do you think a lot of guys are doing wrong? How are you guys putting it all together so well? How are you successful?
It may be a little bit cliche, but outside of the box thinking.
Yeah.
Getting in close to bedding areas, like spooking a deer and thinking, I'll never have a chance at him again. But in fact, some of the deer that we've killed recently or had really good encounters with, we had spooked them first and then just stayed with them and, able to get back on them. Like they didn't completely leave the area.
Yeah. And one thing anybody as a hunter knows, like the more time that you spend in the woods, the more that you learn. Yeah. Period. Like it's just the humbling experience. You're never going to have it all figured out. You're just constantly learning. And we are fortunate to spend a lot of time in the woods. I mean, more than the average person. So we have all these different experiences to kind of draw. And like going back to the whole situational thing, we have seen more of those situations than the average person that hunts, on the weekends. So it allows us to be better prepared moving forward. And that's definitely played a role. Like basically what I'm saying is we've screwed it up before many times. And if you learn from each one of those mistakes, you start correcting that each time a new situation pops up.
I think learning from other guys that have a lot of hunting experience, like Dan Infalt, for example,
sure.
like
Dan,
basically
definitely.
In the last 3, 4, maybe 5 years, like we've had like a paradigm shift in the way that we think about deer hunting because of what we learned from Dan Infalt.
Yeah. And it all depends on what your goals are as a deer hunter. As far as mature bucks go, we started seeing way more mature bucks when we started paying attention to buck bedding. Certainly.
Really?
Yep. And hunting during all times of the season. Really, it's all about bedding all the time. Not necessarily hunting right in the bedding area, but you're always conscious of where that is.
And getting close.
Yeah, in some cases getting close.
Yeah.
But you're always anticipating where he's going to be bedded and what he's going to be doing when he leaves that. Because that's where he is during the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's where he spends his daylight hours, and that's when you can kill him. So you either got to be in a spot that he's leaving to go to, or you got to be in there with him, or vice versa. You got to beat him back there in the morning, and that. Sort
You hear a lot of guys too afraid to go anywhere near a bedding area.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
like the wind will switch, and then they'll blow it out, and
they'll hunt the same spots over and over again, hunt the same stand over and over again, and any of these animals, when you're putting pressure on them, they're going to adapt. They're going to change their habits.
How often do you guys sit the same stands?
Oh, pretty rarely. Every once in a while we will. Usually we'll hunt a particular stand, location, tree, area, setup once or twice a year. With that said, sometimes you go in and do a hang and hunt or go in for the first time somewhere and set up, have a real good hunt. see a bunch of deer, then slide out of there and don't spook much, then you go straight back the next day. And you keep going back until you quit seeing deer, essentially. Or quit seeing the deer that you're wanting to kill. You know, whether that's a mature buck or a doe, it doesn't really matter. You're still bouncing around quite a bit. The access is a huge key as far as intrusion goes and how many deer that you educate in and out. It's just super, super hard to have. Like, those spots are so rare. A lot of people talk about them, and then they set them up, and they're like, yeah, I can get away with this spot, 8, 9, 10 times a year. And most of the time they're kidding themselves because they're so rare to find a spot like that where you can truly get in and out of without leaving a stitch of scent, having any deer get downwind of you. They do occur. I mean, we've definitely seen them and hunted in areas like that over the years, but they are few and far between. We don't find very many of them on thousands and thousands of acres of public land. It's super hard to find one of those on, a small property, for example. So we find that playing a mobile game helps us out a ton.
If you're gonna hunt a spot, walk me through how you find a spot and how you attack it.
If you take like a public area, for example, you start Xing out the areas where there's people, where you anticipate the pressure to be. Then you start looking at what's left. And there's usually not a lot, on a given public area, in a good whitetail state, there's a lot of pressure. So when you start finding these little pockets, a lot of them will surprise you. Maybe it's 50 acres right next to a parking lot, for example. But people park there, and then they take this main trail way into the public area. Well, that little spot, we're going to focus on it sometime or another throughout the fall. I mean, maybe not initially, but that's the first step, is finding the pressure and then going in there and either pre-scouting in like the winter or summer months, going into the actual bedding area and trying to figure out what's going on, boots on the ground, where the deer are bedding, how they're entering and exiting the bedding area. Or after you do this enough, you'll start to anticipate how they'll use a specific area so that you can just go in there blind and hunt it.
Okay.
Without having never stepped foot into it. And that's a little more challenging because you don't know where the exact beds are per se, but it still can be done. The scenario that you're wanting to get into is you want to catch that buck by surprise. You want to be in his kitchen somewhere really close where he has not seen people hunt him before. And that's how you're going to end up with that 15-yard killing shot opportunity, is if you're catching him off guard. You're throwing him a curveball,
right?
For instance.
Especially for early season hunts.
Mm-hmm.
In the rut, it becomes a little bit less predictable, obviously, as bucks are moving around more. But
yeah, and they let their guard down to a certain degree. But yeah, early season hunts, like you mentioned, I mean, bedding is huge. Everybody says bucks are nocturnal and all this stuff, and they don't get up until way after dark. In most cases, we have found that to be false. They get up, most of the time. They just don't move very far.
Yeah.
If you're not close enough, you don't have a chance. You're not in the game. So catching them by surprise and hunting the kitchen in there with them, that's big.
I watched a video where you had that busy road, and you were hunting right off the road.
Yeah.
And you shot a buck. I think you also shot him through the chest, and quartering towards you a little bit, and you just blew right through him. I think you were shooting a G5 Striker.
Yep.
Is that right?
G5 Montec.
With a Montec, and it was like a 500 grain arrow? Or?
Yeah, a heavy 5mm FMJ.
You just smoked him. So
he was close.
It sounded like the year before that spot had burned you.
It did. I was in a tree about 20 feet away. A little better tree as far as the hide went, but I didn't get the shot opportunity that I was wanting. The deer came straight at the base of the tree, and I was forced to be leaning down at a bad angle, like at 2 yards. And he was facing me, caught our boot tracks where we came in. It just didn't work. So we moved trees this year. We just made a slight adjustment. But
that spot looked pretty legit. Like right after you shot that one, another one was coming in.
Oh, yeah. I wish me and Ted would have had our stuff together there, and not just lost it completely when the deer fell over, because we probably would have got a shot at another one. That's a really, really good spot for a couple days of the year.
But it's right on the road. You have people driving by the whole time.
Yeah, and the buck crossed the road. Both of them did.
Yep. And then, you're getting stopped by guys like, hey, what are you doing? How are you guys doing? Are you guys hunting over here?
Yep. Yep.
True public land.
Yeah, that's one of those overlooked little spots, man. Everybody drives right by it. Everybody drives right by it and goes down there and parks. And the guy that we ran into that day had been taking a bicycle like a mile back there. And he was hunting a good area, what it sounded like. Like, we scouted that spot too, and it's really good. But this is just a little bitty travel corridor.
How'd you figure that out?
Well, there was a friend of ours that had hunted the area a little bit for several years, and he was pointing out like these terrain funnels in and around this marsh, and he was explaining how these deer will cross the road in multiple spots around that public land. He's like, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. They've got to escape that marsh on the public side from deer hunters and pheasant hunters and duck hunters all the time. He's like, when you start narrowing down these escape routes where they cross the road onto private, into security, and back and forth, he's like, it'll start making a lot of sense to you. And you start looking at that, and that's basically all it is it's an escape route or an entry route into the public land for those bucks. In this case, the bucks were on the private land, and they were coming across to scent check does on the public side. And another thing that it has going for it is it is one of those escape routes out of the public marsh, but it also has numerous ridges that dump down into one spot. And when you find that, we call those hub locations. It's like the hub of a wheel. Mm-hmm. The ridges are like the spokes.
Yeah.
They dump down into that hub, and you're always going to find tons of deer sign right down in there because of just the natural travel patterns of the deer. A lot of those does are going to end up in that bottom, and a lot, like, there may be a bedding area on each ridge of 4 ridges around that thing. Mm-hmm. And then they can have a hub scrape at the base of that thing, at the base of all those ridges.
Yeah.
So that coincides with that escape route out of the marsh, all in that one little spot right next to the road. And there's not beat trails or anything come through there, but there's a couple real heavy scrapes every year and rubs down through that bottom. And you just got to hunt it on a very, very specific wind in order to get away with it, because that's another bad thing when you're hunting low like that is your wind tends to swirl real bad, and you got to rely more on thermals and specific wind conditions in order to get away with hunting that type of a spot. But that, and it's overlooked, man. Like, they just drive right by it. They probably won't now.
Well, there's a guy that pulled up there. You watched the video and said, well, did your buddy shoot one? They were not going to lie. Yeah, he shot a nice buck just right back here. So it won't be hard for him to figure out.
Nope.
Yeah, public land is a totally different ball game. Like, we'll do a lot. I mean, out west, there's a lot. We're in a lot of public. I don't feel the pressure so much on a bow hunt sometimes, but on rifle hunts, some of the western hunts, there'll be, I'll see 50 guys in orange in the same little canyon.
Crazy.
It's interesting, without a doubt. Figuring out where they go from public to private is the key to getting on the big critters.
Yep.
Without a doubt. And they tend to hold up on the private, but just come over on certain spots at the public where there's a good access in, and they get what they need, and then they go back. And that seems to be my buddy's son shot a 190-inch buck that no doubt had been living. It was on the public. It was real close, and jumped the fence, and it was following a doe right in broad daylight in the middle of the day, and just kind of. But he's an old deer, real old.
We see that too, man. See it a lot. It's usually they're either bedded on public and then going to feed on private, or they're bedded on private and then going to feed on public. or going to does on public, or same deal. They've got something that's there, and that's the nice thing. Usually, public lands are managed by wildlife agencies, either federally or state owned or managed. And a lot of those agencies have very, very good biologists that know what deer need, for example. Yeah. Like they know what type of habitat factors they need. So on most of these public lands, you have a lot of that real good native habitat that deer will need. And even if there's pressure, they'll still find a way to utilize that area.
Now, it's so funny because it seems that there's no public land on the east.
Not near as much as there is
out here.
Everything's public out here.
But you're still finding stuff. Mm-hmm. Plenty of stuff for you guys to get on and have a great season.
Well, like with deer, for instance, 200 yards is a long way for a bedded deer, for example. And like we were talking about with Coues whitetails a while ago, their home ranges are small.
Yeah.
So you take a 5,000 acre public area, and it can hold a lot of deer and you can have a lot of opportunities. It's not like taking a 5,000 acre public area out here and hunting a herd of elk on it. It's going to move from one side to the other in less than a day.
Yeah, yeah.
Those deer will live in a small section of that for a large portion of the year, depending on what kind of habitat they need at that specific time.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, we'll see old, mature, big, nasty 5-6-year-old bucks that are bedded and living 250 yards from these parking lots. It'll happen all the time. Or the 200 yards from an access road, or maybe 80 yards downwind of a tree stand that a guy has had there that he sat for the last 20 years. That's how they'll travel through those areas.
Yeah, you guys pretty much thumb your nose at every conventional whitetail strategy.
Well, I mean, a lot of the conventional ones, yeah, because they didn't work for us, I guess. But I'm not saying that everybody should be that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
everybody has the different way they like to hunt.
Yeah, you'll see. If you watch enough of our videos, everybody hunts different within our group even.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's all dependent on
what
you got
some
confidence
real characters.
Oh,
it's just fun to watch. Greg, do you do most of the editing? Who does most of the video work?
We all share.
You all spend time editing?
Yeah.
Because I don't see Greg in front of the camera as much.
Greg definitely edits, I would say, more than everybody else.
Yeah?
Yep.
I can't tell who's editing what. It has the same kind of flavor generally. There's a few, like the one buck spot and stock that Zach killed.
Mm-hmm. Nebraska, yeah.
Yeah. That one was a little more edited, little fancier, a little more music, a little more this and that. Was that Greg?
Oh, yeah.
That's Greg. Yep.
Yeah. That one's cool. It had a little more B-roll, and then you guys, what I really like about your show is it's not overproduced. But it's not underproduced either. Like you guys do a good, I don't necessarily want to sit there and watch someone talk to me about, you have a nice use of cutaways, during these conversations, which keeps me like involved in seeing what you're talking about, and then I get to see the actual hunt, and you guys are capturing the deer well. I mean, I'll go across YouTube and watch a whole bunch of different whitetail. You can bow hunt or die, or Midwest whitetails, or you name it. They're there on YouTube. You can check them out.
Right. Yep.
But I don't watch every single one of their episodes. There's something different about how you're doing it.
Yeah, you probably don't know what's getting ready to happen in ours. You're probably like, I've ever watched and see this train wreck unfold today.
That's the fun thing about it. Like, we all just kind of have different personalities, and it all kind of blends together well, where people get a little bit of everything. Whether it's the humor, whether it's the education, like you said, it's awesome to know that the way it's produced is something that's enjoyable to watch. So,
yeah, I've been trying to put my finger on it. I just like it. It's very real. You know?
Yeah, we're pretty honest group. You see what you get. I mean, that's redneck from Missouri here.
But what I like though is like the one you shot on your property.
Oh, my family farm in Missouri? Yep.
It's just cool to get that and a little backstory because was it your cousin that came out that night?
Yeah.
And you guys are talking about growing up together and then how I think you shot your first buck before he did, or
I shot my first buck with a bow with him. Like he was hunting across the field from me. And I got down early and was whistling across there and celebrating and stuff.
That's
and
right.
He was set up and on some really good sign and was hoping to kill a big buck that night. Yeah. And I walked up there like in prime time, and was fist pumping and saying, I got one. And he was all pissed off.
Probably not for long, though.
No. Once he got down and realized that I just shot my first buck with a bow, he was pretty excited. But at the moment, he was a little hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just I like that stuff. So, what was your first bow that you got?
Oh man,
my first compound. Well, besides like a little 10-pound draw bear bow, my first was
that's what I had.
Browning Micro-Midas.
Browning Micro-Midas.
Yeah. Huh. Like there was the Browning Midas bow back in the day, and this was the the youth version of that.
What was that roughly?
1990. 91, 92, somewhere in there, something like that. I was 10 or 11.
I had a gray compound bow with a really crappy rest. Like I couldn't hit that fireplace from here with it. And I mean, it was rough.
It was a gray one.
It was gray. I don't have any idea what brand it was. And then the first one I remember was a Golden Eagle Sparrowhawk too.
That was a popular one with a
recurved split limbs.
Really? You had that thing?
Yeah.
I hated that bow.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't too kind to me. I missed like 7 or 8 deer with it.
It was ugly. It was just like a weird bow.
It was.
Tiny little wheels on it, if I remember right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
How things have changed in 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, my first bow was technically it was a Proline. Gray Proline, I remember.
Yeah, Proline bows. That was the actual.
I think so.
Make.
Yeah. And then
maybe that's a gray bow I had.
My dad had an Indian.
Yeah,
and it was really fast actually, and it had these oval cams.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard to pull back. It was like 85 pounds, and you pull that thing back and it's shooting those big aluminum arrows. Pull it back but it was super loud. But
but
it was fast. But when you shot it. Because later he gave it to me. I wanted it so bad. But it had like a real wood riser. It looked like cherry mahogany, like all beautiful and lacquered and stuff. And not machined at all. You know? And then you got the and I remember like the first time I shot it, I finally got the bow pulled back. I think I was like 19. And I shot it, and my hand was like, it was like getting electrocuted. There's so much vibration after the shot.
That's
funny. And then you smack your arm here and there.
Oh, yeah.
Just
whacks you.
It would sting.
Those old string slap bruises.
Oh,
Man, I don't miss those at all.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I have so much more I want to cover, but we got to get to bed. I know we got an early morning tomorrow.
Last day tomorrow.
Last day. Give her a whirl.
And you guys you're gonna have a video from here on there.
Yeah. We're gonna have a bunch of videos from here.
Sweet.
On there. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, dude. It'll be interesting. You'll get to see all the failures unfold one at a time.
So where can people tune into The Hunting Public?
YouTube,
The Hunting Public.
That's where the videos will be.
Just The Hunting Public on YouTube.
Yep. Amazon. You can watch a lot of our stuff on Amazon Prime Video as well, and Facebook and Instagram.
Facebook and Instagram. And what's your Instagram?
At The Hunting Public.
At The Hunting Public.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Congrats
Appreciate
again,
it.
Brian.
Thank you.
Coues.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, dude.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Folks, go check them out. It's good stuff. Stay gritty.